All right, we are on air. We are live. How's everyone doing out there? This is our live show number 19. How's everyone out there on the chat? If you can hear me okay, let me know. Let me know from where you're listening. From California, Sherwood Forest, California. All right, Steve, good to have you on here. All right, welcome everybody to number 19 live show, The Duran. I am here with the one, the only, Mr. Peter Lavelle. Peter, how are you feeling?
Not too well. I have a flu, but I have a few free days. So in Russia, from New Year's to about the 10th, everyone kind of slows down and relaxes. So I have time to recover, but I'm fine. And having the flu has never stopped me from talking.
Right on. We have viewers from Australia, from Istanbul, from Switzerland, from Sweden, from Glasgow, Dallas, Texas, and with us is international affairs and security analyst, Mr. Mark Sleboda. Mark, how are you feeling today?
I'm alive. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And of course, we have in London, the Oracle of London, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Alexander, how are you?
I'm very well and very happy to be on the show. Our last show, I think, for 2018, if I'm right about that, Alex.
Yes, it is. Our last live show.
It's been a great run.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. Alexander, Peter, Mark, we started to get this channel together in the beginning of June is when we started to take the YouTube channel seriously. We had it registered, I believe, at the end of 2016, but we really didn't do much on there until the end of May, beginning of June. And guys, it has been an incredible run. We thank you all, everyone here for tuning into us, for letting us into your homes. We let you guys into our homes every weekend with our shows pretty much every day. And we thank you for all your support. You guys really, stood by us, and we thank you. And it's our privilege to report the news and to analyze what's going on in the world to you guys, and to hear your comments and to hear your insight. It really is just a great community, and we thank you. And hopefully 2019 will be a great year for everybody. So let's kick it off. Peter, we got a lot of people from everywhere, from Denver, Peter. Colorado is your home state, right?
Well, no, I spent my formative years from 5 to 15 in a little town called Wheat Ridge outside of Denver. Our follower here probably knows that. I don't know if the little town Wheat Ridge still exists, but that's where I spent 10 years of my life, and I loved Colorado. Loved it.
Awesome, great to have people here from Colorado, from New Hampshire. Thank you, everyone. Mark, we've got a lot of Syria questions that people sent us before the show starts, and I want to kick these questions to you, Mark, so you can kind of answer them and kind of let us know what's going on in Syria. It's been a busy week in Syria. Before we get into this show, guys, we're just going to kind of go over the year that passed, and we'll look forward to the year ahead. But Mark, we have some questions on Syria, and I'll kind of combine them all together. The questions are from Valdi, from Vinod, from Rob, and from Richie. Mark, what is happening in Syria? Let us know what you think about what happened on Christmas Day with Israel as well, bombing Syria. What you think of that? What you think of the meeting in Moscow between Russia and Turkey, and what do you see going forward in Syria now?
Okay, well, the announcement of the withdrawal of the U.S. occupation forces in East Syria is, of course, welcome in the long term, in the big picture. But in the short term, it creates a great deal of chaos and instability, and it threatens this tenuous, it's not an alliance, but this tenuous geopolitical relationship in the Astana format between Russia, Iran, and the Erdogan regime in Turkey. So it's no secret that Erdogan, at the very least, wants what he calls a safe zone, a security zone, about 40 kilometers deep along the whole length of the Turkish-Syrian border on the Syrian side. And he already occupies this vast swath of Syria to the west of the Euphrates River. He would like to have that to the east of the Euphrates River as well. And what we don't know is if he intends to take more than that. Would he like to take Raqqa? Would he like Syria's oil fields? One thing that a lot of people don't know is that the northeast of Syria is also where most of Syria's wheat is grown. So there's a lot of important resources there that Erdogan is probably looking at. He would like to resettle all of the Syrian refugees, of which no small part of them are of Islamist Sunni nature, in that strip of land after cleansing it of the Kurds. I mean, we're talking ethnic cleansing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is what he wants to do. And Russia is trying to manage Erdogan throughout this, while waiting patiently for the Kurds to come around and realize that they're not going to get an independent country out of this. It's just amazing that they actually believed the U.S. as many times as the U.S. has thrown the Kurds under the bus in Iraq and so on. I'm just amazed. I mean, they know very well. They spent much of the Civil War, when they weren't fighting ISIS, fighting CIA-backed Islamists that are now Turkish proxies, right? This was Obama's CIA that spent $1 billion a year illegally arming, training, and salarying Islamist and jihadi sectarian militants, right? That the Kurds were fighting. So then they ally themselves with the Pentagon of the same country that is arming the people they're fighting with. It has been a really weird, complicated conflict. So Russia had this meeting with it was the defense and foreign ministers of Turkey and Russia. There was also an intelligence minister from Turkey there, and a Russian presidential aide. And they come out of it with the same boilerplate statements that we've heard. Russia and Turkey both support Syria's territorial integrity, and they both support the goal of clearing Syria of terrorists. Now, the problem here is that they are talking past each other and dancing around each other, because they both mean completely different things by that. Turkey supports Syria's territorial integrity as long as they get the political regime change they want in Damascus, or at least substantial political control over North Syria. If they don't get that, then they don't actually support Syrian integrity. The same thing, of course, with Russia. Russia supports, the government in Damascus, and if the shoes were on the other foot, they probably wouldn't do the same if the Syrian government was reduced to a Latakia outpost on the coast, as was, a possibility back in, 2014, 2015. The same thing when they're talking about terrorists. When Russia says they want to clear Syria of terrorists, they mean Al-Qaeda and friends, Sunni Islamists and Wahhabists, right? Which are also Turkish proxies, right? I mean, the National Liberation Front, all of the 31 flavors of jihad, that Turkey has gathered together in various groups in Idlib and around. And here's the real danger is that Russia and Syria appear to have cut off Turkey in Manbij, which is, the one city that the U.S. And the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds, controlled on the west side of the Euphrates. As far as I know, Syrian troops have not actually entered the center of Manbij, right? They are still on the outskirts, as far as we know at this time. The YPG is still playing hard to get with Damascus, and still saying that the Syrian army's only job is to control the borders of Syria, i.e. to protect them from the Turks, but they're not necessarily going to give up political control at this point to the Syrian government. They haven't reached that point yet. And this is creating a lot of problems. We're not at the point of conflict yet. And if it does start, I don't think it will be directly Turkish forces involved, at least in the beginning. Now, they are massing large amount of tanks, troops on the border and within parts of Syria itself. But the real danger is that they will just slip the leash of some of their Islamist and jihadi proxies, the new Syrian army, as they call it, or the National Liberation Front in Idlib. And that is where the potential for danger is, because a conflict between these Turkish proxies and the Kurds will inevitably draw the Syrian government and potentially Russia and Turkish regular forces into this. So we're still at a knife edge. Things still aren't decided, but we're not at that direct military conflict point yet.
All right. Thank you, Mark, for that update. Guys, I was looking in the chat. A couple of you had questions on some of the merchandise in the Duran shop. Real quick, the Duran mugs are on the shop. You can get Duran mug logos, mugs with the Duran logo on the shop, the Duran shop. We are also going to be reintroducing the Question More shirt as well. I saw some people asking about that. So we are going to have the Question More shirt on the Duran shop soon as well. Alexander, we've got a lot of questions about all kinds of topics. Mm-hmm. And these are relating from the year that passed. So thank you guys for sending us questions that are really hot topics of an incredible year, an extraordinary year. I think you were saying, Alexander and Peter, about 2018. We had some great stories, and everyone in the chat is really highlighting those stories. And you're highlighting a lot of things that probably we're going to be talking about. So thank you very much for your questions. And we'll try to answer all your questions. And of course, your super chats are very welcome. Bobby, thank you for your super chat. We really appreciate it. Happy New Year to you as well. Alexander, one of the topics that people are asking about on the chat is the Sino-US trade war. This was a big story in 2018. What are your thoughts?
It is a huge story. And can I just say, it is part of an even bigger story, which is that 2018, for me, is the year when the United States finally began to accept that it's facing great power challenges, that the unipolar moment that we had after the end of the Cold War, if it hasn't fully passed, it is passing very fast. It started with the Strategic Posture Review that the United States military published at the start of the year, which it spoke about the return of great power competition. The major great power that the United States now sees as its challenger is China. And we see the United States acting in a way that shows that it sees China as its adversary, and the gloves are coming off in the relationship between the United States and China. And that is where I think this trade war comes in, because obviously there is Donald Trump protecting his economic base, the interests of his economic base, the people in the industrial heartlands of the United States who feel, rightly or wrongly, that China has abused its trade advantages over the US to build up its industries at the expense of the US. But overall, and overarching that, there is also the factor that the US sees in China an economic challenger, something it has never faced before, and a long-term military challenger in the Pacific, and of course also a technological challenger, which is where all this Huawei confrontation comes. And of course, China is now at the center of a network of alliances that are beginning to emerge. They haven't yet fully crystallized. There is the Russian-Chinese axis alliance. I would call it, I always call it an alliance, because to all intents and purposes, that is what it is becoming, even if it is not formally that yet. But we see all of these things beginning to gel. We are starting to move from a position of unipolarity, with the United States at the center of the international system, to something that more closely approximates a bipolar system, with the United States on the one hand and its Western allies ranged against China, and a Chinese-led world, including Russia to a great extent, but not perhaps as a fully fledged ally of China, and to some extent maintaining its independent policies, but coordinating closely with China. And as I said, this system of the United States dominating the world economy is fading. and with it, the neoliberal global political order that underpinned it is also starting to fray. And you see that in Europe, you see that in many other places.
All right, Peter, we have a question that we get a lot, and we usually get this towards the tail end of the chat, but Cher Burkett would like to know. Peter Lavelle, this is addressed to you, Peter. Peter Lavelle, there are talks about the law and how long the president can run for. President Putin, is Cher Burkett is talking about. Is this a sign that the Duma wants Putin to stay longer? There have been some stories, and we actually did a video with Alexander on this, which we'll publish soon, but there have been some stories, Peter, I read them this week, that Putin, or at least the Kremlin, is thinking about amending the constitution along the lines of Xi Jinping in China. Of course, we don't have confirmation that this is true or not, but what is your thought on Putin perhaps staying longer past 2020?
Okay, well, I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. It's not that Putin wants to stay. The point is they won't let him leave. All right, and it should be flipped upside down. No, I don't think he's going to run for another term. I think this is his last term. I think he's left his mark. When you think about it, look at the entire breadth of Russian history. Now we have leaders that will come and go. It's based on the rule of law and a constitution. Putin has a legacy of unbelievable magnitude when it comes to Russian leaders. Why would he want to fiddle with that? There is no indication that he wants to stay after his term comes to an end. Now, there could be some acolytes in the Duma, which nobody really cares about in this country. They can say what they want, but there's no strong evidence that I'm aware of that Putin is thinking of. He could have changed the Constitution anytime he wanted. Okay, I mean, really. So I think that he's going to finish his term. He is going to be actively involved in finding a successor. We have said, Mark and I and Alexander Mercouris have talked about this before. I think Mark put it succinctly last time we mentioned this topic, is that 3 or 4 or 5 maybe candidates be popped up that he approves of, and then he lets the electorate decide which one. But they will all be of a Putin-like policy vision for Russia. Remember, Putin has always been about 2 things, and it's very simple. And his rule has been very simple: is reform and sovereigntization, protecting Russia's sovereignty and modernizing the country. I've lived here for it will be 21 years in a couple days that I've lived here, and I can say beyond a doubt, a lot of modernization has occurred in this last 20 years, and a lot more is going to happen. What is it, Mark? How many new metro stations are they going to build in Moscow? You told me once.
Yeah, they're building 20 to 30 new ones a year for the next 5 years.
And any of you that have never been to Moscow, I strongly suggest you come. The metro system, if you come from a Western country, will blow your mind. Okay, it is the best transportation system in the world, bar none. Okay, so Mr. Putin is going to be with us to the end of his term, and then I think he deserves a good retirement. Again, why would he's not a Merkel, that just needs to hang on to power. No, he has a legacy, and I think it's going to be something that his successors will find difficult to fill his shoes, but somebody will have to do it.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for answering that question. We get that question a lot. It's always great to hear you answer that question. It's a big story, and it'll continue to be a big story until 2024, I believe. So we'll see what'll happen. But Mark, staying with Putin, we have a question from Dhruv Singh, and this has to do with, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I do believe that Putin oversaw the successful test of a hypersonic missile this week.
Yes.
And Dhruv Singh wants to know, do you think that the Russian hypersonic missile is destabilizing?
Okay, first of all, yeah, it's not.
And there's the Pentagon freaking out about this, because I also read a story. The Pentagon is
freaking out. This is technically, yes, it's a hypersonic missile, but it's actually more than that. It's the Avant-Garde is a hypersonic glide vehicle. Okay, so Russia already tested an air-launched hypersonic missile several months ago. That is the Kinjal, or Dagger, and that is an air-launched hypersonic missile launched from an aircraft that could be fitted with a conventional or nuclear warhead. The Avant-Garde is an entirely another beast, and of course, it's also hypersonic. But what it's designed to do is to send it's launched from an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM. It is basically designed to glide over, the target country or territory, and then it can release and accelerate warheads down at hypersonic speed with incredible maneuverability. Basically at its leisure. It has hang time. Russia is, with both the Kinjal and the Avant-Garde, is way out in front in this regard of the other major great powers that are at least a year or two away of pulling out hypersonic weapons at this point. So, the idea that Russia doesn't innovate anything, well, they innovate military really well, and they also are able to develop it and put it into deployment much faster right now, it seems, than the U.S. military-industrial complex. With the big, huge corporate and monopolies they have there that suck up so much U.S. taxpayer dollars. No, it does. It is not a destabilizing weapon. It completely misses the point of these hypersonic weapons. Their purpose is to restore the strategic balance, to restore mutually assured destruction, to restore Russia's nuclear deterrent. The strategic balance, was put in jeopardy by the U.S. unilaterally pulling out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty back under George W. Bush, and then the presidents since then continuing to ring Russia and China and the world with individual units layered upon layers of an anti-ballistic missile shield, right? Which threatens, maybe not immediately, in totality, but it does present a threat, and more a future threat to the strategic balance, to Russia's strategic deterrent, with the threat of a first strike capability. So the point of these hypersonic weapons is that anti-ballistic missile defense that the U.S. has right now is useless against them. It cannot stop them. And that restores the mutually assured destruction that we've had all through the Cold War till today. And that is the point of these new weapons. It's not to destroy America.
Right. And Mark is absolutely right. I mean, Putin made it very clear that when George W. Bush, his administration, announced that they were withdrawing from the ABM treaty, that Russia would respond. It's responded.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Can I just quickly say one very quick thing? I think what is created shock in the West, at least in the United States, and to some extent in Britain, is not that there is going to be a dramatic shift or danger to the United States or Britain or the Western powers from these weapons. It is incredulity that Russia is the first country to develop them. I mean, this is absolutely the cutting edge, as I understand it, of this kind of technology. The United States has not got there with all its huge resources. China has not got there with all these huge resources. The idea that Russia, the country that had been defeated, supposedly, in the Cold War, and which was supposedly economically on its, crushed, could possibly bring out a weapon like this more quickly than the United States and China, that has really stunned people. And I think it is something that you can see through much of the commentary that is going on around this subject here. So if we're talking about panic, I don't think there's panic, but I think that there is dismay and astonishment. And it comes back to the point I made earlier about the United States sensing that his unipolar moment is passing, that once again it is in a strategic arms race, or at least a restoration of the military balance, and that its economic position is now being challenged for the first time.
You know, the thing, Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right, and Mark knows more about military affairs than we do. But I'll go back to something that Alexander Mercouris said at the beginning of this year. We had these strategic posture reports come out. And it's very interesting is that, you know, Russia has these supersonic weapons right now, but that is in tune with what I said about sovereignization, to protect its sovereignty here. American foreign policy and defense policy has basically been anchored in bullying and threatening weak powers, regime change. That's what they've been focused on since the end of the Cold War. And they've been caught with their pants down because now they realize that we are going back to a great power rivalry. And the U.S. it's tooled up, but it's tooled up in the wrong way. And it's been caught flat-footed in many ways as well. And Russia's military, you know, it's really interesting. A military expert here in Moscow explained to me is that Russia doesn't really doesn't come out with new weapons all that often. What they do is they constantly upgrade and improve and make it better. And it's so much more cost efficient. These weapons are cutting edge, but they're not a waste of money, these boondoggles that the Pentagon gets involved with these contractors that just soak the American taxpayer for defense needs that are not necessary.
It's important to know where Russia is spending its military, and you see they're spending its military on R&D and investment, and where it gets returns, right? Russia has the best missile air and missile defense in the world, the S-400s, the S-500s specifically for missile defense, right? Because why? Because the U.S. and you know the West in general has an overwhelming air force advantage. So Russia built the air defense to defend against that. Electronic warfare. Russia saw a real place to develop there, and the U.S. military is all afraid and talking about Russia's advances in electronic warfare, again, which a major component is to stop attacking communications and global positioning and so on. So electronic warfare is still largely a defensive unit. Why Russia spends so much money on these new hypersonic weapons and stuff, other than of course getting around anti-ballistic missile defense, is that Russia depends more on its strategic deterrent vis-a-vis the United States than the United States needs its strategic deterrent. Why? Because the U.S. has an overwhelmingly powerful global conventional military with more than 1,000 military bases around the world. It spends more than 10 times a year what the U.S. does. And most of the other big military spenders in the top 10 are also NATO countries and allies of the United States. Right? That's a huge conventional advantage. And a lot of that is invested in things that allow power projection around the world, like aircraft carriers. Russia only has one aircraft carrier, and to be the Kuznetsov, and to be honest, it's an old Soviet piece of garbage, right? It's lucky it stays afloat, and it's an embarrassment, to be perfectly honest. But Russia is not investing in power projection, beyond the countries in its immediate area. Syria is as far as the Russian military is going to go. Russia is not a superpower anymore. It's well aware of its hard power limitations, especially compared to the U.S. And Syria is as far as you're going to see the Russian military operate. It's not going to go any further than that. It has reduced geopolitical horizons, and it's playing what cards it has very smartly in that area, right? It doesn't jump at everything. In fact, sometimes I think that Putin is too cautious, right? I'm critical of him from a Russian war hawk, perspective. I would have liked to seen a little more muscle displayed in Ukraine, going all the way back to 2014 with the Westpac putsch in that country. And we talked about that on Crosstalk for years, right? So Russia needs its strategic deterrent because of the overwhelming conventional force and the amount of military spending that the U.S. and NATO countries do. That's why it's invested more in these hypersonic weapons and getting them out as fast as possible, because it doesn't have the overwhelming conventional force, especially when it comes to power projection.
All right, let's get to some super chats. Alexander, Chelsea wants you to wave to everybody, so give Chelsea a wave. All right, and let's get to a question, Alexander.
That was very royal of you. That was a very royal wave.
Well, he's the Oracle of London. Alexander, Al-Kut wants to know, do you think there will be any legal backlash for Turkey, USA, Israel illegally being in Syria? Any legal backlash?
No, I'm afraid not. I mean, if one looks at the various institutions, the legal institutions, I mean, first of all, can I just say, I mean, the United States is illegally in Syria. I mean, let's be absolutely clear about this.
And in other countries.
Turkey is also illegally in Syria. What those two countries have done is been done without the consent of the Security Council, without the consent of the United Nations, without the consent of Syria itself. So they have acted illegally. They have also waged what is in effect a war of aggression against the Syrian government. That war has been very violently pursued. It has done huge damage to Syria. Huge numbers of people have been killed, displaced. There has been a terrible war of aggression fought against that country. Do I expect any legal repercussions from that? I am afraid not, because if one looks at the various courts, they are not able in any effective way to act either against Turkey or the United States, and no one should expect that they would do, even if they had the wish to do so. And they don't have the wish to do so, because if you look at the jurists who staff these courts, overwhelmingly, they are people who are either aligned with the United States or who are, in a sense, intimidated by it. So I'm afraid we have to be absolutely realistic about this. Legal repercussions, there are going to be none. What we might see are political repercussions in the way that the situation in the Middle East evolves going forward. But legal repercussions we can put aside.
You know, right. Alexander, I think it's just very curious that maybe some of our viewers here, maybe we're the only people that have ever said that the war that the U.S. has been waging in Syria is illegal. It's never said on the BBC. It's never said on CNN. It's never said on Fox either. There is a bipartisan or across the spectrum in the West to overlook this very obvious fact that these wars are illegal. The war in Iraq was illegal. There was no United Nations Security Council resolution either. So it's more of a habit, and I find it remarkable. And I've had problems with Ofcom in the UK that I point out the obvious under international law, which I guess doesn't mean anything to them.
No, well, Peter, they're not just illegal. They are wars of aggression. And if we go back to the origins of the modern system of international law, Nuremberg said that the worst crime, the absolute worst crime, is a war of aggression because it contains within itself all the other international crimes. So there you are. It is. These are terrible wars. And can I just say, a war of aggression? If you go back to the 1980s, when there was the international court, the World Court, the one in The Hague, looked at the undeclared war that the United States was fighting against Nicaragua at that time by sponsoring the Contras. It was absolutely clear at that time that that was a war of aggression. So what was a war of aggression against Nicaragua by sponsoring the Contras is certainly a war of aggression against Syria by sponsoring these various jihadi militias, what Mark calls the 31 flavors of jihad. But as I said, we have to be realistic about this. The modern world, the correlation of power, if you like, to use the Soviet phrase, which I always like, the balance of power in the world makes it impossible that there will be any legal repercussions about this. That is the reality, and we must face it.
Yeah. aggression is the capital crime under international law, and specifically the UN Charter. Non-interference and sovereignty are the foundation of the UN Charter and international law. And the United States and its allies and NATO have spent the last 30 years trying to erode that foundation with ideologies like R2P, the right to protect, right, and so on. But Russia and China and Iran and others have really pushed back on that. But no, of course, there won't be illegal percussions. One, because yes, the U.S., the balance of power, the U.S. is still the world's only superpower. However, they've reached their peak and they're going down. But for another decade, they still will be the only superpower. And even among great powers, they will still be the first among equals for a decade or two yet. But also the way that the UN international law and the UN Charter are structured. The U.S. is one of the permanent members, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. They can veto anything that goes through the Security Council against them, just as Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France are, right? These are the countries that basically are by the foundations of the UN Charter, the way the UN is structured, above the law. They are. And specifically, the United States rejects the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice over it. They have threatened to pursue and sanction any countries that even dare try to exert International Criminal Court over American generals, war figures, and things like that. And they've rejected International Court of Justice jurisdiction before. We talked about it, with the Contras in Nicaragua. That is the limitations of international law. You can't expect too much from the UN. People do all the time. The purpose of the UN, right, and specifically the Security Council, which is where the real power is to prevent great power conflict, specifically nuclear war, between great powers in the world. And it's done that because we're all still here. And you should be grateful for that. And that is why we need to maintain the UN and not expect it making some type of Star Trek type utopia out of the world, right? It has limitations. It is founded on realist geopolitical principles enshrined in the UN Security Council. Don't undervalue that, but don't also expect too much out of the UN beyond that.
That is exactly right. I totally agree.
Well, I mean, it's said a little bit differently. I agree with Mark. I mean, don't have too many high expectations of the United Nations, but at the same time, the Charter is the baseline for everyone. Okay, and what really gets on my nerves is the rank hypocrisy, talking about sovereignty, talking about self-determination. I mean, no, I mean the powerful determine that. Okay, but don't push for self-determination of some people at the expense of other people using the same principle. Okay, that's what really irritates me on how the UN and international law is used.
Alexander, we have a super chat from Brendan. Alexander, how much political clout does Bulgaria have at this point, and how are Bulgaria-Russia relations?
Well, I don't think Bulgaria has much political clout, if I'm going to be straightforward about it. It's a small country. It's had a difficult period economically. It lost a lot of its population after it joined the EU, in fact, which isn't widely known about. It's also a country with which, by the way, I have a family connection. I think that Bulgaria does not have a great deal of clout. I think that popular opinion in Bulgaria is becoming a great deal more Russophile than it was even a few years ago, and certainly more so than it was in the 1990s when I was going there. But I think in the end, the Bulgarians will do exactly what they're told. by Brussels and Berlin and Washington. And I don't think anybody should have any illusions about that.
Right, Peter, we have a super chat from Gaza West. Hi, guys. What do you think the end game for the Israelis and Saudis are in Syria in regards to an effective outcome that they would be happy with in order to stop their jihadist funding? So what would the Saudis be happy with in order to stop this madness?
Okay, let's put Israel to the side.
Israel, yeah.
Well, Israel always just wants chaos. That's always its goal in the region. The more that you can divide and conquer. They were the ones that through their conduit at the Brookings Institution, where they wanted to have the partition of Syria. Remember how that was being peddled. But I'm glad you brought up the Saudis, because here we go back to Turkey. All right. They don't want to see a major geopolitical victory for the Turks in Syria. MBS again screwed up. I mean, everything this guy touches, he screws up. And one of the things is that he's going to have to figure out, or his people, or so the family itself, what are they going to do to be able to counter or ensure that he doesn't get a major geopolitical victory. It's not inconceivable that Saudi Arabia is going to have a very broad review of its foreign policy over the last few years. And that may have something to do with Iran. Again, Syria went south on them. Yemen has gone south with them. Israel is in political chaos right now, but whoever comes to power is going to be a radical, violent right-winger like Netanyahu. But the Saudis are going to have to reconsider their decision-making process over the last few years, because Erdogan holds a lot of cards right now. He is very gleeful about it. And of course, because of the Khashoggi affair, the Saudis want their revenge in the old-fashioned way. So I think that Saudi Arabia, if it's smart, and that's asking a lot, it should be reevaluating its position vis-a-vis the region and keeping its eye on Turkey.
All right, Mark, following up on Syria, a super chat from Afterglow. After a U.S. pullout, if Israelis keep attacking Syria, can they expect a Syrian-Russian strike into Israel?
Definitely Russian, no. No, definitely not. I mean, there's a lot of talk and going around the alt media about new rules of engagement that vastly exaggerate these as yet untested new rules of engagement since the shooting down of that Russian reconnaissance plane when the Israelis used it for cover to launch attacks on in the Damascus area a couple months ago, and the delivery of the S-300s to Syria. No, I do not foresee any circumstances bar outright Israeli attack on Russian military bases in Syria that would see Russia attack Israel. Russia has been extremely cautious around Israel, holding their hand. Russia has much better relations with Israel than the Soviet Union did, and they're inclined to keep them. While they do recognize Palestine, they don't necessarily have problems with Israel, and part of that, of course, is the large Russian and ex-Soviet populations in Israel. There's a lot of room there. They comprise a lot of however unfortunate it is, Netanyahu's right-wing alliance, which rules the country and will probably come out of these new elections still ruling the country. So that's no small part there. Now, Syria has started a little bit. They now have the room for a little bit of demonstration of defense. And in the most recent attack, what we saw was that the Syrian government fired one air defenseman into Israeli airspace as a response to the attack. Now, it didn't hit anything. I'm not even sure if it was aimed at anything in particular, but it was a warning that Syria will start to actively defend itself, and not only in Syria.
All right, we had a little bit of feedback there, but I think we got most of what Mark was saying.
I heard it all.
Okay, great. Alexander, what's going on with the Skripals? Cher Burkett would like to know.
I'd like to know too.
This was a big story. So get into it a little bit.
And so would I, because of course that is the key to this mystery. I mean, these two people who we were hearing about, who was poisoned in March, and they've now vanished off the face of the earth. We have no idea what's happened to them. There was this extraordinary interview. It really was an interview. There's this film of Yulia Skripal being brought forward to give a kind of discussion and read out a statement, and it was so obviously rehearsed. And nobody knows. I mean, the Russians have not been given access to them. The media has not been given access to them. Anybody who wants to follow the British account, the British story of what happened in the Skripal affair, the major reason to have doubts about it is the way in which everything that has happened to the Skripals has been kept a secret. I mean, the way in which they have been prevented from speaking out and saying what they really think is, I think, the greatest possible sign that there is something fundamentally wrong with the narrative that the British are providing.
Yeah. All right, that was the Skripals was a huge story, and we still don't know.
Well, no, but what's
going on there?
The Skripal story was the biggest story ever until it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Peter. And Peter, a question from Vincent: how much influence does Russia have over Israel? Mark touched upon it a little bit, but in general, not even.
Mark can follow up on me, but I don't think they have a lot of influence over Israel. But Russia sees Israel as a geopolitical fact. Okay, I mean, there's nothing they can really do about it. They do engage the Israelis on a very regular basis, and that's part of Russia's pragmatic foreign policy. But influence over Israel, I think that the Israelis take the Russians a lot more seriously. The Israelis can hoodwink the Americans, any day of the week. Okay, they take the Russians a lot more seriously. And I when a warning comes from the foreign ministry here in Moscow, they look at it very, very carefully. So it's not influence over, but they do engage intensely when necessary.
Mark, do you have anything to add on that?
I agree with Peter that the purpose here is not leverage over Israel. Israel is still a U.S. ally. They have certainly greater clout across the Middle East, and that's where we see Russian-Israeli relations play out. It's not a matter of Russia having direct influence over Israel, but greater power in the region.
All right, Alexander, what is going on? Do you know what's going on in Sweden? Pax Bella would like to know. There was an election in Sweden, which was a big story, and the election provided a very different and interesting result.
Yeah.
And this is a big story throughout Europe, I think, which is the rise of, for lack of a better word, nation statists, nationalists, patriots, whatever you would like to call these leaders that have been winning across Europe. Sweden has yet to really form a government, and Sweden falls into I guess this big bucket of countries that are making a shift in the EU towards more of a nation state mentality, and a lot of it is tied into the immigration and Merkel's disastrous immigration policy. What's your take on this story?
Well, I think the big story is that Sweden has failed to form a government, because this is really this is the key point about this. I mean, Sweden has been one of the most stable countries in Western Europe. It has long been dominated by the Social Democratic Party, going all the way back to the 1930s. That was the dominant party in Sweden. It created the Swedish welfare system. It developed the whole Swedish economic model. And of course, that hegemony of the Swedish Democratic Party is waning, as that election made very clear. but it has still not proved possible, it seems, to create a alternative, a stable alternative in Sweden. And what we see is the immense unwillingness of the establishment parties to get into coalition or to form governments with these new, as you call them, statist or neo-nationalist groups that are now emerging. So that's, I think, where we are with Sweden. I think this is a precursor of what is going to come, growing instability across Europe as the old hegemonic parties, the Swedish Social Democratic Party, the British Conservative Party in Britain, the Christian Democratic Party in Germany, as their influence fades, we start to see growing instability as the transition towards a new political system takes shape.
All right, Peter, going off of Sweden, another big story was Italy. And Sheriff Burkett would like to know, do you think Italy's budget will fall in line with Brussels? So do you think Italy is playing along with Brussels, or will Italy continue to, I guess you could say, rebel, for lack of a better word, against the Brussels dictate?
I think they're going to want to do both at the same time. I think they're going to continue their rebellion, but they, at least at this point, they will have to fall in line for budgetary concerns. But they're demonstrating very, very clearly that the old days of just getting in line are over. They're fighting now. They're pushing back, and I think that what the new political arrangement in Italy, what they're showing their people, is that they will do battle with Brussels. They might not win every single time, but what's most interesting for me is what the Italians are doing, kind of dovetailing off of what Alexander Mercouris is saying, is that others are beginning to look at how to deal with Brussels and their hegemonic control of the economy. That's why the EU is in trouble. We can talk about social policy and postmodernism, but it's the euro. I mean, that's what everyone's been captured. They're all held hostage to it, and the Italians are demonstrating that their electorate has had enough of this. They have to start making decisions on their own. Immigration is one of the top issues. Brussels and Germany are not going to determine anymore what Italy's immigration policy is going to be. The Italians are echoing what we hear in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, in Austria. So this is a taste of the future. Nice, all the power, more power to the Italians that want to buck the Brussels line on issues. You know, Brussels is far, far away, but it's the people on the ground that have to live through the policies, these neoliberal policies that Brussels keeps pushing. Macron learned that the hard way.
Yeah, Alexander, we've done a couple of videos on Italy, and I'm sure you have something to follow up on with Peter's remarks as to what Italy's position is with Brussels and its budget.
Yeah, I think there's two things to say about Italy. Firstly, I mean, if we look at the Italian government itself, we must always remember that it is not a fully stable government. It is brought together by these two groups, the Northern League and Beppe Grillo's Five-Star Movement. They are not fully compatible with each other, and one gets the sense that the Five-Star Movement is a bit resentful of the fact that Salvini, who is the leader of the Northern League, is steadily emerging as the dominant figure within this coalition. But I think overall, the Italians are playing a very cunning game, which is that they're not letting the Brussels force them into a premature confrontation, which would lead to a major squeeze on the Italian economy, which is what the people in Brussels were plotting, essentially. So they make concessions, which when you actually drill into them and look at the numbers, aren't really concessions at all. But they keep the whole thing festering along until eventually one senses that there will be that confrontation somewhere down the line when the Italians are more ready. But I think that is the game that they're playing, and I think they're playing it very cleverly.
Yeah, but the thing is what the Italians have going for them is watching the demise of Macron, because Macron is going to let all budgetary restraints go out the window to keep in power, and the Italians say, "Well, look at the French. You know, you let them be slackers, and why are you picking on us? You already killed Greece. Okay, we're not next in line. Why don't you deal with one of the major the axis of Germany and France? You know, France is in trouble right now. So why are you going to pick on the Italians? That's a cunning game.
It is a cunning game. Can I just also say, I think the Italians have learned a lot of lessons from looking at the way Tsipras disastrously mismanaged the situation for Greece in 2015. And I think they've also learned some lessons, actually, from the way the British have bungled Brexit. And I think they're handling the negotiations with the EU much more intelligently.
All right, Alexander, is that your door?
It's my door.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, jump in there really in just a second. Yeah, I agree. My dogs are going to start now.
Who's visiting Alexander during our live show? Everybody, who's visiting Alexander?
Be aware of the limitations of the Italian government, particularly with it not only internal stability with its fight, its Brussels. You know, remember, it is a far left, alt-right party. But at the same time, Italy has demonstrated exactly what is needed across the rest of Europe to defeat this neoliberal, centralized, center-right, center-left technocracy in Brussels. You know, that has dominated the structure of the EU and is threatening to try and take it in some type of super state direction with the the purpose of deteriorating and actually getting rid of the European nation states, their political sovereignty and their identity as well. And Italy has shown the way, an example to the rest of the countries in Europe of how to beat that central power. And that is, we have to recognize that the left-right political axis doesn't mean anything in an age of neoliberal globalization, because the center-right and center-left have triangulated. They destroyed that axis, that difference. It's taken a while for the far left and the alt-right to realize that they have far more in common with each other than they do now with the center. And Italy has demonstrated how they can come together to fight this and take power. And this needs to be replicated in France. We're seeing it right now in France with the Yellow Vests movement, which is, again, Mélenchon's far left and Le Pen's alt-right. But in Italy, they managed, with the particulars of the crazy Italian political system and the zillion parties they have, they were able to form a coalition and take power. The rest of the countries of Europe, the far left and the alt-right forces there need to find a way to imitate in their own countries what the Italian five-star movement and the coalition government was able to do. And replicate that. That is the only way to beat the hegemonic, center right, center left. The only way.
All right, guys, we've hit our first hour. We have over 162 people viewing. Guys, smash that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. Remember to subscribe. Remember to click that notifications bell. And of course, your donations on Patreon or PayPal really help us out a lot. Thank you guys for all the super chats. Ken sent a super chat earlier in the show. Thank you, Ken, for that super chat as well. We did not forget it. Thank you. It's always appreciated. And Peter, we have a great question to open up the second hour as we look ahead to 2019. But Peter, I want you to look ahead to 2020. And Igor would like to know, is Obama or Kamala Harris serious about a 2020 presidential run? Obama, I imagine Michelle Obama, and God forbid Barack Obama.
Let's
look ahead. Let's look ahead, Peter.
I certainly don't think so. I certainly don't think so. Kamala Harris is initial poll numbers right now. She's in single digits. She's really very much at the bottom. What I think the question could probably be slightly tweaked. I mean, what'll be interesting for the Democratic Party for 2020 is the identity politics. So white men need not apply. Joe Biden, I mean, all of their most experienced people are essentially white, okay? And, and Cory Booker, well, he's a clown. Kamala Harris, she doesn't show she has much political skill. I think she demonstrated that during the Kavanaugh hearings. What she said at the Kavanaugh hearings are going to haunt her for a long time. There's a lot of campaign ads there. It's a bit early. I think maybe you could ask us that question about 4 months from now, because people are going to start declaring. But the Democratic Party is going to have a real mess on its hands because of its embrace of identity politics. Does it have to be a woman? Does it have to be a black person? They don't seem to be particularly interested in competence, all right? And so this is over time, this is going to get worse and worse and worse for the Democrats. 2020, Nikki Haley, I think, will replace Mike Pence. I know, Mark, I know. We talked about this in a taxi, remember, going to dinner. That would be a very savvy move on Trump's part, because she's the favorite of the neocons. The Israeli lobby loves her, Trump, and she's a woman. So, I mean, the Republicans might be able to outdo the Democrats when it comes to identity politics. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm all for Rand Paul, Tulsi Gabbard 2024.
Okay, we're talking about what? No, Mark. I'm talking about what most likely will be, not what you want. Okay, right. Because I would probably agree with you, but it's not going to happen. You know it.
Alexander, who do the Brits want to see? Who do the people in Britain want to see taking over the reins of the U.S. presidency? Because I know Trump and May do not get along. Well, May is on the way out.
I think the short answer to that is anyone but Trump. I think the British will be delighted to see the back of Donald Trump. But I don't think they've yet formed a clear view. But I suspect if the British establishment was put to ask that question, I'd say a lot of them would probably say Joe Biden, because they know him. I mean, he's somebody that they've had dealings with. He seems the Democratic Party front runner. He's a good NATO man, if I could put it like that. And I think that's probably the person that most British establishment figures would probably be most comfortable in the White House. Can I just say something? I am not knowledgeable about American politics in the way that Peter and Mark are. But I will say one thing. Here in London, Michelle Obama's book is absolutely everywhere. You go into every bookshop, it's there in the shop window. And I can't help but wonder whether this book is being promoted in the way that it is in preparation of some kind of presidential bid going down the line. I merely offer that as a thought. I don't know that it is true, but I merely say it. Living in London, its visibility is extraordinary.
You know, if you think about the Obamas now, it's Obamas Incorporated. It's $1 billion enterprise right now. I mean, who in their right mind wants to walk away from that? Okay, no, this is just a pageantry right now, it's great for clickbait, okay, but I mean, I don't think there's anything serious to that. Oprah Winfrey, that a lot of people took that seriously until she said no. And the good news is, as we leave 2018 going into 2019, hopefully the creepy porn lawyer, we won't be hearing much from him anymore.
I try to stay away. I'm trying to ignore American politics as much as I can these days. It's hard to. I'm trying to. But Alexander talking about stores, what he's seeing in the stores, just quick reminded me of something anecdotal going back to Hawaii that I noticed here in Moscow. I was out doing late New Year's shopping yesterday, and I stumbled on a Hawaii store in a Moscow shopping mall, which I haven't seen a Hawaii specific store before.
I've seen a couple.
Yeah, and not only was there a big store there they were doing absolutely crazy business. There was a line snaking out of Hawaii, going down the wall, and good 200-300 meters. So all of this U.S.-Canadian trade war and this kidnapping of their chief financial officer, it hasn't had an effect on their sales in Russia. And evidently Russians think it's great PR.
Peter,
well, no, I mean, so did
I'm bombing your house.
No. I told you before. I'm polishing my pocket watches this evening. Right. I have many of them, and they're right next to my computer. So don't worry, anybody.
All right, Peter. Let me ask you a question then. From Abdulkarim Hirsi. And one of the big stories was Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. But looking forward, do you think that Iran really is developing nukes? And if they get caught, if they are, what do you think will be the reaction? If they are.
Okay. Oh, they aren't. Okay, they aren't. Okay, and they're actually keeping with the nuclear deal. So I don't even think we even have to answer that hypothetical. Okay. A lot of people don't understand is that why did Iran get into negotiations with the United States and the Europeans and the Russians over a nuclear deal? Is that they wanted the end of the sanctions, and the only way they could get to the end of the sanctions is that say that to sign this deal. So, I mean, they signed away getting something that they never wanted in the first place. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's actually the joke on the West. And so now the Iranians are saying, well, look, I mean, we signed the deal. You signed it. You agreed to it. It went through the United Nations, and now you want to walk away from it. So I do believe that there could be a scenario where Iran may go down that path, but I don't see them doing it right now. There was a national intelligence assessment. I think it was in 2008, saying that there was no evidence whatsoever that they were trying to develop a bomb, and I don't believe they're doing it now. I think it doesn't get them anything. It doesn't get them. They're already a target, okay, and I don't see how they would ever use them offensively. It would be only for their protection. So I don't think Iran is going there, and I don't see the circumstances where it would want to do that, though it's not impossible.
All right. Brendan has a 2024 ticket set up for, I imagine, the Russian elections or the U.S. elections, Brendan. Lavelle, Sleboda. How's that for a 2024 ticket?
No, I would be impeached in the first week, so I don't want the job. Thanks. No, I prefer doing this.
I'm a Russian citizen now. I don't think I'd be allowed.
Well, it could be for the 2024 to follow up after Putin retires.
I think that Alexander Mercouris should be made a member of the British royal family, and that he should become the new viceroy, take America back and fix it. Okay, we could have viceroy and the Oracle of London. I would back that.
I think I'd be facing another American Revolution if anything like that happened. They wouldn't tolerate my accent. That's
Oh, Americans love British accents. That's not your problem. Okay, don't worry about it. Okay,
all right.
Just say you're from Vermont. Okay, people will believe it. Okay.
Okay, let's get to some more interesting questions. I have some great questions here. Mark, what are the chances that Ukraine develops a nuclear weapon? Is it permitted to have one?
Yeah, the chances of Ukraine developing a nuclear weapon are zero, at least in the near future, simply because neither the U.S. nor the European powers that support the Putsch regime in Ukraine will allow Ukraine to develop nuclear weapons. They're not insane. They will not allow that type of strategic instability in the world. No one wants Ukraine to be a nuclear armed power. And if Russia saw a Banderite regime in Ukraine beginning a program to develop nuclear weapons, they would swiftly stop it.
All right, Alexander. This goes to everybody, but I'll start with Alexander. This is a hard question, Alexander, so are you ready?
Mhm.
From Sharon Burkett, any New Year's resolutions?
On my part, New Year's resolutions. Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to start writing more. I stopped writing a few months ago for the Duran. I'm always saying that I'm going to start doing it again, but I'm going to make an absolute effort to do it, because I think that writing actually helps me to organize my thoughts better. So I think that will add something for the Duran, and I think that will also probably help our viewers and our readers. But other than that, well, I think I'm going to keep going, doing the same things that I have been doing through 2018. I think 2018 vindicated what I have been doing up to then, so I see no reason why I should change.
All right, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Mark, any New Year's resolutions?
To try to do better to ignore American politics.
Good luck.
Especially the witch hunt around Trump, at least to try to stop talking about it on air, because it's just driving me nuts now. To write more, little too much commentary, not enough writing, and to finish at least half of my Kindle book list, which just keeps growing instead of shrinking.
Peter, what are your New Year's resolutions?
Writing as well. All three of us. I want to do more writing. I think I want to write about my time at RT. I want to write about my time in media. Yeah, I'm inspired by a lot of the writers at the American Conservative website, which I encourage everyone to take a look at, because I see, I read a lot. All of us read a lot all of the time, and a lot of it's badly written. It's not a lot of it's not well thought out. But I read these articles in the National Interest. Robert Mary, double E. He's turning into one of my favorites, and I think that I need to sharpen my pen and get back into the writing world, because I'm inspired by them.
All right, Wildcat, thank you for your super chat as well. And Wildcat, always enjoy your intelligent discussions. All right, thank you for that super chat.
Hey, yeah, I mean, while we're mentioning it there, we gave a shout out to the American Conservative, but we'd definitely read the American Conservative. The other things we read are the Moon of Alabama blog, and occasionally the National, the Nation.
Well, yeah, the National Interest is a very interesting website, and I have to admit that the website name says it all, in the national interest, meaning in America's national interest. So that's fair enough. Okay, that's their purpose. But it's really a mixed bag. Sometimes just some really weird stuff that they put out that I like I said, not very well thought out. But there's some real pearls every once in a while. So it's worthwhile to stop by there on a regular basis.
Oh, and Stephen Walt at Foreign Policy.
And guys, the most important shout out is to go visit theduran.com.
Absolutely.
Guys, aside from this channel, we have a really, really good website, and on the website you will see articles handpicked by all of us, especially articles that Alexander Mercouris also lists every day, so you get some insight into what he is reading and what he's following.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, we do links to lots of articles now all over the place, and I think that probably gives a pretty good idea of what's going on in the world.
Alexander, one of the biggest stories was Russiagate. What do you see for Russiagate in 2019? Is it going to die down? Is it going to continue? Is the Russia hate and the Russia racism? Because I think there really is some Russia racism going on.
I think if we're looking at the original collusion, conspiracy, obstruction, justice thing that was being promoted back in 2016, 2017, I think that's basically run its course. I don't think there's very much more steam in it. But I think that we will probably see Mueller and the people around him trying to find ways to keep this thing alive in other ways by dragging out other stories. We've seen this happen with Michael Cohen. We see this happening with Stormy Daniels and all the rest. They will try to keep some kind of atmosphere, of scandal around Donald Trump alive, because that's been a major part of the way in which the Democrats have sought to discredit him. So Russiagate itself, in its classic form, probably going, but more scandals, I'm sure, down the line, undoubtedly.
Peter, what's your thought on Russiagate? Are we done with this thing, or is it just going to keep on going and going?
No, I think Alexander Mercouris is right. There's going to be derivative directions that they will take on. It's obviously they're going to be with the House going to the Democrats. They're going to have all these committees to investigate Trump's finances, you know, his taxes, his global business interests. They're going to want to ensnarl his family. It'll be very nasty. It's going to be very, very personal. But they ran on it. They don't have much choice. Okay, exactly. That's what they ran on, and people are going to want results. You know, don't expect that much leadership from Nancy Pelosi if she's made leader, but she can't control all the committees investigating Donald Trump. So it, you know, and look, I mean, it's part of the liberal media business model that keeps them going. I mean, Trump hatred is what they do, okay, and they have a segment of the viewing public that want that. All right, and unfortunately, the American public knows, with every passing day of their obsession with Donald Trump. I don't care about Donald Trump. I really don't think much about him. Okay, but it crowds out news. Maybe that's the whole point. They don't want to have policy debates. They don't really want to talk about what's really going on, and that's why people that watch Fox. I mean, at least Fox talks about things that the viewers are interested in. You can agree if it's good or bad, but they're interested. That's why their ratings are so high, because they talk about things that are of interest to their viewers. You know, Mark Zucker over at CNN, I mean, he's really open about it. I mean, that's how they make money, and they're going to continue doing it.
All right, Peter, I want to stay with you. We got a super chat question, then I want to go to everybody on the panel to get their thoughts on this. And the super chat is, was Trump made president to take the U.S. out of the supranational control process? Globalists, nation states are intentionally reversed, newspeak, so to speak. So I think the super chat is trying to say, was Trump put into office to take the U.S. out of all the entanglements it has overseas, like we see in Syria, like we're hearing that he's going to move the U.S. Military out of Afghanistan? Do you think that Trump was put in this position, and is he going to follow through on this going forward?
No, he wasn't put into the position. He was elected unexpectedly. Well, elected, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what, I mean, look, I remember on Crosstalk, we did a number of programs on what Donald Trump's foreign policy could be as president. And I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. There was an article in summer of 2016 in the National Interest. It was a convoluted article. It was very confusing. It was contradictory, but it was saying no more stupid wars. No more paying for everything for America's allies. I mean, those elements were there. I do believe that resonated with a lot of people. Also, his very nationalist rhetoric, America first. Okay, I think the middle class in the heartland had been ignored for decades, and this is a guy that spoke their language quite literally. I mean, I actually going to report that Donald Trump, his vocabulary is about 1,500 words. Okay, he speaks clearly. He speaks directly to people. It's not always politically expedient, but he wasn't put there to do anything. As I pointed out on Facebook here, I'm sick and tired of the liberal media talking about the adults in the room around Donald Trump. Well, it's the adults in the room around Donald Trump that want to continue this catastrophe in American foreign policy. So at the end of this year, as much as I've criticized Donald Trump on many issues, kudos to him for standing up to the adults in the room.
All right, Mark, a lot of people are trying to try to make out Trump's intention for getting the U.S. out of Syria and possibly out of Afghanistan and maybe even more places. What do you think's going on here? And does it even matter?
Uh-oh. Mark, we don't have
you have to unmute.
We don't have audio.
We don't have audio.
Okay.
Alexander, do you want to pick up that question?
Yes, I'll tell you what I think. I don't think that Donald Trump is... Oh, hello. I don't think Donald Trump is a very deep man. I don't think this is something that he has calculated and has some very grand agenda beyond it. I think what he has seen is that the Syrian war is going to go on forever. I think he's seen that this war in Afghanistan is going on forever. I think he's becoming very frustrated with the advice that he's been constantly given by the military that, you know, one more heave is going to achieve some kind of outcome which he can't really see down the line. I think he's very concerned about the effect on his heartland voters of losing people in Afghanistan and in Syria and having body bags coming back to the US and all of that. And I think he's decided that this isn't a game worth playing. He's a businessman. There's no value in it. And he says, I'm going to just close it down. This is an unsuccessful venture, and I don't want to really press on with it. Now, can I just say something, which is, of course, goes back to the point that Peter was making just now about Donald Trump. I think the great shock for the US elite in 2016 is that a candidate, Donald Trump, who stood out and said he wanted better relations with Russia and an end to these interventionist wars that the United States has been waging around the world, actually found that that message gained traction with the American people and was actually popular with a lot of them, and ended up in getting this person elected president of the United States. Now, what has happened over the last 2 years is that they've pulled every stop to prevent Donald Trump acting out on that program, which he won in part the election on. And what we have seen with the pullout from Syria and the talk of the pullout from Afghanistan is that, you know, there's the Donald Trump very belatedly is coming round back to that program and now seems to be serious about it. And shock horror, it appears to be popular again with the American people. So I think this is a deeper thing. I think this explains a lot about the establishment's hostility to Trump. I think it explains all this nonsense, and Peter's right to call it nonsense, about adults in the room. But I think that Donald Trump is acting in his own electoral interests because he understands that's what his base wants. And I think he has some kind of understanding that this is also in the US's interests, because none of these wars, none of these interventions around the world, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in all sorts of places, have achieved any of the objectives that their advocates said they would.
Yeah, and
All
exactly
right, Mark,
because I don't know if Mark can hear us.
I don't know if Mark's with us or not, if he fixed up the audio, but Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, but it really is interesting if you look at the media reaction, the corporate media reaction to Trump's decision to pull out of Syria. It shows the amazing disconnect and a deepening disconnect between the foreign policy elites and the American people. I mean, from what I understand, Trump's numbers went up after he decided to publicly pull out of Syria. People do remember him saying these, no more stupid wars. And I think that, you know, he's realizing and you have to remember, you know, the markets are in a crazy spin right now, and you know, he has to talk about keeping his promises because the economy looks a little wobbly right now, and that's what he was so proud of. Now he's going back and he's looking at his promises, and people remember, and people like this. People, the average American is sick and tired of paying for these wars, and as Alexander Mercouris rightly put, I mean, body bags is not what was part of the deal. Okay, so and it's usually the lower middle class that pays in blood, and the American taxpayer pays in treasure. So Trump's political instinct on this is good, and I think he got sick and tired of being railroaded by these guys. We need 6 more months. I already gave you 6 months. I already gave you a year. I already gave you 2 years. You're not giving me any results. And I want people to give me results. If you can't do it, leave.
There you go. And I think one of the people that probably was taken aback by Trump's Syria decision was John Bolton, and 9987 Jelly Bean says, I wonder how John Bolton took the news. Mark, you want to describe what John Bolton probably went through seeing Trump announce that the U.S. will be pulling out of Syria and possibly Afghanistan? No, we still have audio. Mark, you have to unmute yourself, or it's an audio issue. Yeah, guys, I think Mark he's been hacked. No, he's having audio issues. We apologize, guys.
Okay, hopefully he'll get back on. Okay,
he'll get back on. Peter, you want to describe how Bolton's reaction might have been?
Well, he was in the room when Trump was on the phone with Erdogan, and apparently Trump was asking him, "Can we? He's taking the phone. Can we get out quickly? Yeah." Quickly? Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to leave quickly. I think Bolton probably thought it was a hypothetical conversation, not a decision. I think he was probably aghast. And he may, if God is in heaven, Bolton will leave and he'll drag Pompeo with him. Okay. Trump, Trump is a very flawed person, and he's a very flawed politician in many ways. Okay. But I mean, he was duly elected. He should have people around him that want to bring his vision to fruition. And not that I would agree with all of those decisions, okay? But clearly he's been surrounded by people that are just obstructing him left and right.
Alexander, do you want to?
Yeah, what I wanted to say is, Bolton, I think, must have been not just shocked and dismayed by Trump's decision, but absolutely confounded and baffled by it. Because, of course, what had happened was that back, I think it was in March, Donald Trump said that, American troops are going to be pulled out of Syria very soon. And then Bolton comes in. And what actually happened was not only that policy that Trump announced was reversed, but that it became American policy towards Syria became much harder. We had all this talk about, the US staying for the long term, not leaving until Iran left Syria, more American troops going into Syria, all sorts of things going on. And we had this Ambassador Jeffrey, making all these very hawkish comments. And I have no doubt at all that all came from John Bolton. And if you also remember, at the time, I think it was in late August, early September, when there was talk that the Syrian army might move into Idlib province, there were all sorts of threats coming out of the US of military action if that happened. And again, that looks to me to have been Bolton's policy. And suddenly, it takes one telephone call between Trump and Erdogan for all this policy, all this enormous structure of policy, which Bolton must have been working very hard to create over the summer, to be turned around, to be turned completely upside down. Now, he must have come away from this utterly shocked and must be wondering afterwards, is anything I'm going to do in this White House going to really have any kind of long-term future? So I think Donald Trump must have lost a lot of confidence in Bolton over the last couple of weeks. I think he's probably saying to himself, what was Bolton trying to drag me into in Syria? And Bolton himself must now be feeling very insecure about his own position.
It's interesting. It's almost like he was playing out an episode of The Apprentice, because he showed Bolton who's the boss. Absolutely. Because Trump, he's no fool. I mean, when you see all of these articles all through the establishment media about the power of John Bolton, I actually made a program on Crosstalk about Bolton's foreign policy. Yeah. And I think Donald Trump, he has no peer. When he's in the room, there's no peer. He's the guy. Okay. I think sometimes it gets down to something as simple as that.
And can I just say something? I mean, we talk a lot about Donald Trump's flaws as an individual, and I agree with him. He's got lots and lots of flaws. But to stand up against the entire national security, foreign policy bureaucracy, against people like Bolton, consummate bureaucrat that he is, against people like Mattis, this extremely powerful general, against Lindsey Graham in the Senate, to stand up against all of these people takes a lot. I mean, not everybody is up to that. Obama, who was also elected on scaling down the interventionist wars, as we saw, absolutely wasn't. So, you know, all credit to Trump. I mean, he did it.
All credit to Trump. He took a lot of hits, but he withstood all the hits, and he's still around. So I think there's a lot to be said about his stamina, his perseverance, and I think he has an excellent political instinct as well that a lot of people don't give him credit for. Mark, is your audio back with us? Do you want to do a quick test? If you hear us, let us know, Mark. If you want to plug in the mic, plug it in, and let's see if the echo is gone as well, and we could try that as well. And we have some super chats that I want to get to. Imre sent us a super chat. Happy New Year in advance. Happy New Year, Imre. Al-Quds says an extra hour for the New Year Christmas stream, please. Another hour. I don't know if we could do a 3-hour show. Two hours is pretty exhausting, and we enjoy doing it. But we'll try to stay on as long as we possibly and humanly can. But thank you for your super chat as well. We really, really appreciate it. And Metro 465-2387 says, appreciate the work that Duran is doing. Thank you for your super chat as well. We really appreciate that. Alexander, I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest story was Brexit and whether this thing is going to really happen. And in 2019, it just might happen. And one of the most underreported stories was about Ireland and the Irish question within Brexit. I mean, maybe it was reported in the UK, but internationally, we didn't get much talk or discussion about Ireland's position and what Ireland is up against with Brexit, as well as Scotland, to be quite honest.
I mean, this is it, because, of course, I mean, Britain is, of course, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, though it doesn't look so united at the moment. I mean, Scotland voted Remain. Northern Ireland voted Remain, and of course, if we're talking about the Irish Republic, that seceded from Britain in 1922, is a very proudly independent country, and is part of the EU, and has every intention of remaining so. In fact, it's very much a core member of the EU at the moment. So the Irish dimension, you've got to understand something absolutely fundamental about Ireland, which is that Ireland is the Irish Republic. It consists of most of Ireland, the island of Ireland. It does not consist of this anomalous Northern Irish province in the northeast of the island of Ireland, which was separated from the rest of Ireland in 1922, when it remained part of Britain. It's a strange entity, because though politically and constitutionally it is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, it has always had, throughout nearly all of its history, autonomous local government institutions. And the main British political parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, do not have a presence there. Now, the Irish state, Southern Ireland, the Irish Republic, wants to reunite the Republic of Ireland. That is very much the aspiration of the people of the Irish Republic. Opinion in Northern Ireland around this, it continues to be divided, with the Irish Protestants in the north still wishing to remain connected to Britain. But this has been the source of long conflicts which have continued within Britain, within Northern Ireland, which have affected Britain, which are a continuation of the even longer conflict of Irish independence, which goes back well deeply into the 19th century, and which the people in the Irish Republic do not consider to be fully settled until Britain completely withdraws from Northern Ireland. Now, this has managed to get this very protracted conflict has managed now to become involved in the whole Brexit question of the Northern Irish backstop, this demand by the Irish Republic and by the EU that Britain maintains a soft border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. I'm going to make my own prediction, which is a long-term prediction, which is that Britain will leave the European Union in March. It will probably be what people call a no-deal Brexit or a clean Brexit. This is my own guess. but that sooner or later, further down the line, we're going to see Britain leave Northern Ireland, and we are going to see a united Ireland again. I don't know how that's going to happen. There may be all kinds of constitutional and political arrangements put in place, but I think that is the trend of history, and I think that is what we will see.
All right, thank you, Alexander, for that Brexit update. We always have a Brexit update, it seems, on these live chats. It is an important story, that's why.
If I can talk about Brexit now, because I was talking about Ireland, but if we're talking about Brexit, the thing to bear in mind is that in 2 weeks' time, Theresa May's ghastly plan comes back to the House of Commons. And what we've been hearing over the Christmas, New Year holiday is that various of her officials have been roaming around the newsrooms trying to persuade everybody that opinion in the Conservative Party is swinging back behind her plan, and we will see it triumphantly voted for come the middle of January, when it is going to be voted in the Parliament again. I don't believe it. I don't have any indication at all from everything I've seen and heard that opinion in the House of Commons has changed on this issue at all. I expect that the Conservative rebels, the Brexiteers, will remain firm against it. I expect that Jeremy Corbyn will remain firm against it too. The pressure on him to change his position on that and on the second referendum idea is very strong. So I expect, I calculate that the likeliest prospect, I don't pretend it's a certainty, is that Theresa May's plan will be voted down again in the second half of January, and that we will be moving forward earnestly towards a no-deal Brexit, which will happen on the 29th of March. That is my prediction at the moment. We will see.
All right, we have some super chats. Triumph for your 10. Thank you for your $10 super chat. And from Johan, thank you for your super chat as well. Peter, we have another super chat question from Lethal Dissonance. What are your views on anti-BDS laws in the U.S.?
Boycotting Israel.
Yes,
I think that is. I think everyone has that right to do that. I mean, the 20 plus states now can punish state and federal officials for supporting it, publicly supporting it. That is a denial of freedom of speech. It's a freedom of speech issue, irrespective of how you feel about Israel and boycotting it. That is a right if you want to pursue it. The irony of it all is this legislation that Congress is quite cowardly trying to slip through. An American citizen can criticize the United States all it wants, but it can't criticize a foreign country. I mean, what's going on with that? So I think creating legislation and enforcing it and punishing people for supporting boycotts is a fundamentally I think fundamentally illegal thing to do. It is a infringement upon freedom of speech.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for answering Lethal Dissonance super chat question. Mark, I think you are with us. I do see that, yes, you are testing and we hear you. There is a little bit of an echo, but I don't think it's bad. So let's throw a super chat question at you and see how it goes. From Mike V, Kurds are citizens of Syria. What gives Turkey the right to invade a sovereign state, ethnically cleansing Syrians without due process, nor UNSC mandate?
Power. Power does. Regional power via the United States and Russia. Neither Russia nor the United States want to go to war with Turkey. For the United States, and it was always going to be the case, relations with NATO member and ally Turkey and the U.S. military bases in Turkey are far more important than the Kurds could ever be. The fact that, the Kurds, the YPG, whatever political leadership they have in Syria was too stupid to recognize that for the last few years, and doesn't say much for their, political leadership. Russia also doesn't want to go to war with Turkey. Turkey is at an extremely important geopolitical pivot point in the world right now. If Turkey was lost, if something dramatic happened and Turkey was lost to the NATO alliance, that could definitively switch, the balance of power towards Eurasia. So Erdogan is playing this importance of Turkey's position in the world right now against both Russia and the United States and Saudi Arabia for everything it's worth. I think he's pushing things way too far. He's pissed off every single country surrounding Turkey and the region and all the world superpowers at this point. I think that his ego is trying to cash checks that even Turkey's important geopolitical pivot position, can't cash in the long run. However, well, it's playing in the short run. Of course, he has no rights, legal rights under international law, the UN Charter, anything like that, to do what he's doing in Syria. But that when has that mattered in Iraq or Libya, Syria, Yemen? International law has limitations, in that it's only law when countries obey it, and most of the time they don't.
Most of the time they don't. All right, thank you, Mark, for answering that super chat question. Thank you, Aluk, for your $10 super chat. Make Istanbul Constantinople again. All right, thank you for that super chat, guys. I want to close out the show on a couple of news stories that were hot in 2018 but kind of disappeared. But I think in 2019, I want to hear your opinion if these stories are going to come back. And I'm going to really open up the floor to you guys to get your view. One of the stories was South Africa. Another one of the stories was South Korea. And of course, we have Yemen. And these, I think, are three very, very big stories that a lot of people were talking about, and then just kind of fell off the map. So I'll open the floor. Peter, I don't know if you want to start. South Africa, South Korea, Yemen. What do you want to talk about? And I think stories are going to make a comeback in 2019.
I think that one of the silver lining stories of 2018 is the very real, meaningful, tangible goal of bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula. And I think that the South Korean president, I'm not a big fan of the Nobel Peace Prize, because I think it's been given to so many of the wrong people in history. But particularly the South Koreans, they deserve an enormous amount of credit and respect for what they're doing. And it's the Americans that are putting up all of the obstacles, wanting to slow this down, wanting to do it on their own terms. And the South Koreans are saying, essentially, we want our sovereignty back. The people up north we are ethnically the same. We have a long cultural history together, and it's something that is doable, I think. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. It's going to be incremental, and the U.S. should get out of the way. Get out of the way and let these two countries, this one people, move to create the future they want. And I think it's very possible.
Yes, and I meant to say South Korea and North Korea, of course. Someone corrected me in the chat. Yes, North Korea, of course.
God bless Moon Jae-in, and the leader of South Korea. And I think we said it on Crosstalk innumerable times. The single most important thing for South Korea and North Korea to move forward, and we can't have too quick expectations here, but to move gradually forward to peace, is to ignore the United States, is to keep going on this no matter what the United States does. And I'm sure that there are hardliners in South and North Korea both that would like to put a stop to what is going on. And certainly the neocons in the United States do. But at this moment, they're opening railroad links between the two countries. They had a shared Olympics team. There's so much goodwill going on right now, and most of it is because the United States dropped out of it, and it's important for them to keep going on their own, no matter what the United States does.
All right, Alexander, North, South Korea, but we also have South Africa and Yemen. And Yemen's a story that I know Peter also talks a lot about Yemen. That's very underreported, and there has been some movement on trying to find, I guess, trying to find some peace in Yemen, even though I don't think much is happening right now with Saudi Arabia. But do you want to touch upon those stories?
Yeah, I will. But can I just say something about Korea? Because of course, this is a strange thing. Because in October 2016, I think it was 2017. Sorry, I predicted that there would be some sort of rapprochement between the two Koreas before it started to happen. What I never expected was that it would happen as fast as it did. I mean, I wrote an article, as I say, in October 2017, saying that was where things were pointing to. But the pace of this thing has been extraordinary. And by a coincidence, a very remarkable coincidence, I was talking to a Korean acquaintance yesterday, whom I haven't spoken to for many, many years. She was telling me something which I hadn't known, which is that opinion in South Korea has been hardening very strongly against the United States. One of the factors being the installment of these anti-missile missiles, these American anti-missile missiles in South Korea, which is done with very little consultation amongst the Korean people, and which is clearly seen by Koreans, ordinary Koreans, as being directed against China, and that this has had a major impact on South Korea's economic connections with China. It seems that one of the biggest South Korean retail chains was thrown out of China in retaliation to that, to the installment of THAAD in South Korea. And this is, as I said, caused a great sense of revulsion of feelings towards the United States in Korea itself. So I think we need to keep an eye on this, but I think the ability of the US to control this process may be diminishing because, in part, its attempts to do so are running up against increasing hostility amongst the North Korean and South Korean people. Now, about Yemen, Yemen remains a horror story. I was reading only just recently that apparently, contrary to all you're hearing about, this war sort of dying down in Yemen, that the Saudi grip on certain areas is tightening, that the humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen is getting worse. I don't, unfortunately, have any optimistic expectations about what's going to happen in Yemen anytime soon. I don't have any expectations that this supposed hardening of positions by the US Congress is going to change anything with relation to Yemen. I think we must look forward, unfortunately, to continued war there and continued suffering, and that is going to continue right through 2019. As for South Africa, all I will say about that is that South Africa seems to be on the downward slide ever since Nelson Mandela ceased to be president. I think Zuma, by general consent, was not a successful president, and that's putting it generously. And it seems that Ramaphosa, who everybody was saying was going to be this great change from Zuma, has had to win over Zuma's supporters by promising the seizure of land in South Africa, which, however historically justified it may be, and it arguably is historically justified because of the way the white settlers seized that land at the time of the British Empire, it's going to have very bad effects, I'm sure, on South Africa's economy, which is not looking very strong. So I'm afraid continued weakness in South Africa, continued war in Yemen, and neither story is looking a good story as far as I can see.
Peter, you've been one of the, I would say one of the only media personalities that has consistently talked about Yemen and has placed a focus on Yemen. I mean, there's many crosstalks that I've watched where you said, guys, I really want to talk about Yemen. I don't want to let this story die down. I don't want to let this story be forgotten. Not many other media people are doing it at all. Why is that? What's going on? Why are you out in front talking about Yemen and trying to bring a spotlight to Yemen?
Well,
But just
I'm talking about
any-
yeah, I talk about it because the corporate media wants to ignore it. I mean, unfortunately, it took the murder of Khashoggi, a Saudi insider, to shine the light on Yemen. I mean, that's when people started talking about it because it's of Saudi foreign policy. If it hadn't been for the Khashoggi affair, we probably wouldn't be, or at least the mainstream wouldn't even mention it. I was told once that MSNBC didn't mention Yemen for a year, not one story about it. No, the thing, what really I find very painful is this is a conflict that should have never started, and it's one that can be very easily stopped. And we're going back to people like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo made a complete ass out of himself defending the Saudis. And it's all because of Iran and of Israel. Israel and Saudi Arabia are not America's friends. America gets nothing out of it. It's a one-way street. And it has with their fixation on the neocons on Iran. And that is one of the reasons why the U.S. has turned a blind eye to what Saudi atrocities in Yemen. I mean, I put it on Facebook a few weeks ago. You know, all of the refueling of Saudi jets, the Defense Department forgot to bill them. Forgot to charge the Saudis. I mean, what in the world is going on there? And they won't give Trump a wall? Really? So, I mean, it's just unconscionable what is happening. One of the richest countries in the world is destroying, committing a form of ethnic cleansing against some of the poorest people on the planet. And they have failed to do that, and they continue to fail to do it. The only thing they will accomplish is massive death and disease that will have a blowback effect eventually if it hasn't already started. It's unconscionable, it's unnecessary, and the United States has shown itself to be cowardice, and the UK and the French and NATO as usual, cowardice. This is a humanitarian crisis that is man-made. So I will keep talking about it.
All right, thank you, Peter. And guys, we are approaching 2 hours and 1,000, close to 1,200 viewers. And I want to kind of wrap it up and just kind of let Peter, Mark, and Alexander really just talk a little bit about how they see 2019, what they think the big stories are going to be. Maybe a prediction or two if you guys want to do predictions. If you guys want to tell our viewers what to look out for, what you think the trends are going to be going into 2019. Really just kind of stream of consciousness, talk to our viewers, everyone on the chat, also talk back to Peter, Mark, and Alexander. And I really want to leave it to you guys to just kind of have a discussion with our viewers about what you see for 2019. Alexander, do you want to kick it off? What do you see 2019? How do you see it shaping up? What are you taking a look at? What are you keeping an eye on?
The big thing to look at is what's going to happen to the world economy, because it is looking extremely wobbly. I mean, we've had the stock market in the US going up and down at extraordinary oscillations. We see the US Fed continuing to raise interest rates, very much against the wishes of most people now, I think, in the sort of economic establishments, but no doubt feeling that it has to. And there's growing talk that we could be seeing in 2019 an international recession, with the United States perhaps going into recession and with the rest of the world economy slowing. And be very clear, if there is a recession, if there is a big international recession next year, that is going to change everything. I mean, that will change the whole political and economic atmosphere right around the world. Looking at the smaller things, well, I live in Britain. I'm not sure how big an international story Brexit actually is. But for me, obviously, whether there is Brexit or not in March, and what the terms of that Brexit is going to be, that is important. I predict that it will happen, and I expect that it will be a no-deal Brexit. It'll be interesting to see what the effect of that is on the European Union. I expect more political turbulence there. We will see what happens in the Middle East, whether the Russian diplomacy that we're talking about is able to stabilize the situation. But the big rogue uncertainty is what the US is going to do. Will the US press on with its conflict now that it's pushing against China? Will it instead draw back? Will it press on with its plan for regime change in Iran, which clearly is what the Bolton-Pompeo agenda has been? Will that continue? Will the US withdraw from Afghanistan, as some people are expecting? Will it escalate the situation against Russia and Ukraine? What is the US going to do? So we've got lots to keep an eye on in 2019. 2019 looks like it's going to be a very important and rather fraught year.
Mark, what's your take on 2019? What are you keeping an eye on? What do you think is going to be happening? What would you tell our users to follow in 2019?
Yeah, we came into 2018 worrying about four big stories, four big, potentials for conflict and problems in the world. That was the Syrian conflict, the civil war in Ukraine, the Brexit with the UK and the EU, and the political witch hunt, the investigation, the Mueller investigation against Trump in the US and the political instability there. And going into 2019, those are the same big four stories that we're concentrating on. None of those stories was resolved. And I would argue that every one of them is in a position where there is at least the potential for even more chaos in each one of them. I'm still not sure Brexit is actually going to happen. They're pushing this quote people's vote, second people's vote, very, very, very hard right now. And if they do that, I mean, are they going to have a third vote then, just to really make sure, what the people want this time? The potential for political instability in the UK and then, spreading into the EU is very hard there. I do not think the Mueller investigation will be wound down anytime soon. I think it will find new energy. And there will be a whole new host of investigations, committees, indictments launched against Trump and figures throughout his campaign and administration, and the potential for impeachment, whether the Democrats have the votes with neocon defections or not, I think is very high. There will be a lot of political pressure on the Democrats to begin those types of proceedings, and particularly in Ukraine, there is an election, quote unquote, a putsch regime election for president that is going to be taking place in the early spring there, in just a few months, and the potential, with the sitting putsch president, the oligarch Poroshenko, at 6.3% approval rating just a few weeks ago, going into that election against right now, Tymoshenko, the gas princess, another oligarch, and a comedian from Odessa, Zelensky, who is improbably leading the polls. The potential for real political instability in putsch Ukraine is really high, and that is very dangerous, because a way out of such political instability is always provocation and restoration of full-scale war, with the civil war with the Donbass, or trying to drag Russia into a full-on direct conflict. And that we'll be watching the election in Ukraine very closely. The other two big stories that bigger picture is the new hyper war arms race. Not just hypersonic technology, but autonomous kill vehicles, artificial intelligence, or SAI, sapient artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligenzation of militaries around the world, part of this new hyper war arms race that is very much going on right now. And the fragmentation and nationalization / blockization of the internet. The gold age of the internet is over. The internet we all knew, and we'll tell our grandkids about it. And increasingly, we see social media giants censoring, everything on the internet at the say-so of the Atlantic Council and so on. You will start to see China and Russia erect borders around their own internet in response to all of this going on. The furor in the U.S. over some Facebook posts that are, as far as anyone can tell, actually arranged by New Knowledge, and this interference with manufactured Russian bots in an Alabama Senate race, really calls into question everything there. But the big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they've all shown themselves to be clearly synchronized with the U.S. state. They are not international. They are not global. They are vehicles of U.S. power around the world, and that will lead to future fragmentation and blockization of the internet. I think within 10 years we will have a Western internet, a Chinese internet, a Russian Eurasian internet, and very possibly even an Arab internet eventually out of that. And there's a great story on this in Foreign Policy on the warring internet, and anyone interested can read more about the potential for it there.
All right, Peter, close it out for us. And Peter, one of our users would like to know your thoughts on Trudeau. Everyone loves it when you talk about Trudeau, by the way. So if you can weave in, as you give out the closing thoughts for this 2 hour,
I think
if you can weave in a little Trudeau, that'd be great.
Peter versus Trudeau.
First of all, I think that Alexander and Mark did really great summation. So I didn't really have any other stories that we'll be watching. I just kind of very broadly, Alexander Mercouris, you sent us an article, I think it was from the FT today, which I thought was really quite interesting. I'm going to be watching again the big picture of how the U.S. and its alliances deal with the return of great power competition as it conflicts with American exceptionalism. And that's really one of the problems here, because there is a recognition that the unipolar moment is over. They just don't know how to deal with it. And I think that makes the United States very act rashly, not thinking about the unintended consequences. So I think the potential for conflict is high. Donald Trump, he may not be impeached for Russiagate. He may be impeached for being a danger to national security. That's where this will evolve. It'll go from Russiagate to he's a madman. Iraq, the Iraqi government being snubbed by Trump when Trump visited the troops, I guess for 3 hours, made it very clear that they're going to start moving to have the United States leave Iraq. So leaving Afghanistan, leaving Iraq, okay, Syria. The foreign policy establishment won't tolerate that. They will use all their resources against Trump, and of course the media will be backing them up. Justin Trudeau, he's a fruitcake. Okay, what do you say? Okay, you talk about the leader of the free world. I hate that phrase. It's a Cold War phrase, and it should be abandoned. Okay, it's ridiculous. All right, Macron certainly isn't it, but Trudeau wants to be the leader of the postmodernist, post-Marxist, no gender, no border world. Congratulations. Okay, that position is called a fruitcake. That's it.
And guys, one more story that I think could be an interesting story in 2019, and possibly the biggest story, and that's Assange. Real quickly, what's your takes? Is this going to be the year where Assange gives up, is captured, is taken into custody, maybe strikes a deal with the UK? What do you guys think?
No, he's not going to strike a deal with the UK. I predict that this will be the year, 2019 will be the year where he will find himself in the United States, charged with espionage and put on trial. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, I would utterly oppose such a thing. I think it would be wholly wrong in every way. It would be a massive blow against free speech, against human rights, whatever you like. But that is the reality. I think that is what is going to happen. The only thing that could save Assange, in my opinion, is if there is a political crisis in Britain, which is highly possible, and there is an election and Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister. And anybody who wants to see Assange safe, that is what they should see. That is what they should want.
Corbyn would protect Assange, Alexander.
I think he will try to. I mean, I don't know what Corbyn personally thinks about Assange, but to the extent that Assange has friends in Britain, they are the sort of people who tend to support Corbyn, and some of whom are known to be prominent within Corbyn's entourage. I mean, a friend of Peter's, for example, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos being a good example.
All right.
I'll just say one last thing. If Julian Assange does go on trial in the United States, which is highly likely, it will be a secret trial. Again, you know, that would be a bastardization of the legal system.
All right.
Yeah, I'll double down on all of that and go one step further. That will also be a weapon to use against Trump and the Trump administration, because the whole thing now is to draw these 6 degrees of separation or connection, if you will, between Trump or the figures in the Trump administration and campaign, Trump to Assange to Russia. And we have to get Glenn Beck's conspiracy theory board to try and draw those connections, but that's definitely where everything is going. So not only will Assange end up being, in a kangaroo court show trial in the United States, whether it's public or not, but that will be the non-smoking gun that they try to aim at Trump.
I just don't know how Trump does it, guys. I mean, he gets hit on. I mean, they just attack him 24/7. I always wonder, how much stamina can the guy have?
They never attack him for the things they should be attacking him for. And there's plenty of those. That's not the things they attack him for. It's the things that he does right that they attack him for.
I think also some of these attacks actually make him stronger. If we talk about the disengagement, the troop withdrawal from Syria, it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen. I mean, are they going to start, is anybody going to say, that Donald Trump should be impeached because he's withdrawing troops from Syria when that is popular with the American people? Is anybody going to run against Trump in 2020 as the war candidate? Is that how they expect to win? I mean, in a way, it comes back to what Peter said. He is a very clever politician, something people don't seem to understand. And he seems to have some kind of personal self-confidence that keeps him going in spite of all of this.
Well, but Alexander, the reason why I think that it's a possibility is that, if you look at Russiagate, I mean, there's the Republicans in the Senate will never vote to impeach him over that. But Lindsey Graham and other Republicans, it'll be trumped up charges. Sorry for the pun, but there's a national security state. It's very, very deeply entrenched, and it has its interests. Okay, it's not the United States, it's not the world, it's them. And if that is threatened, they will mobilize, and they have the media to help them out. That's all I'm trying to say here. I mean, what we're seeing is this age of the disconnect. The American people, if you look at polls, look at voting, they're against these wars. They are. But the political class, and I use that singular now, they are not. And the media will be their megaphone to amplify this message. I mean, you saw the reaction to Trump, the Syria withdrawal. I mean, that was ferocious, and in a very ferocious media environment.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's why I think it can morph. It will morph from Russiagate to a threat to national security.
the latest polls show 52% support Trump's withdrawals from Syria, Afghanistan, 48% against. And I'm willing to bet that the majority of that falls along purely partisan lines.
Yeah, but Mark, but there's a caveat there. When you look at the media environment, it is like 99% against Trump's decision, but still 52%. That is the remarkable finding.
Right. It is remarkable. That's what I mean, because the independents are obviously going towards Trump on that issue, right? In support of withdrawal. And if Trump can turn 2020 into a referendum on U.S. wars of aggression around the world and where the troops are, whether they're at home actually protecting its borders rather than trying and failing, at reforging the world in far-flung countries around the world, then Trump just might win again.
Yeah. And I think there's no doubt about it that the one figure that has been talked about the most in 2018 and probably will be talked about the most in 2019, I would say definitely will be talked about the most in 2019, is Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, absolutely. He is the man of the moment
He's
right now.
huge!
And he is huge, and he will continue to be huge. And we will continue to be talking about him.
Yeah,
but anyway, guys.
He displaced Putin, okay?
Yeah, he did. That's for sure. That's for sure. Guys, we have got over 2 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes. It's been a great show. This is our last show of 2018. And we will be with you in 2019. Of course, we will be reporting a lot of news, a lot of stories that we'll be doing videos for you guys. And once again, we want to say a very, very happy 2019 to everybody that has supported Duran, everybody that's watching this channel, everyone that follows this channel. Thank you very much for everything that you guys do. Peter, any last words to all our viewers and any wishes for 2019?
Have a nice evening. I'm going to have a beer. And like I said, I have a terrible cold, but it's never stopped me from talking. And we'll be doing a lot of talking on the Duran next week.
All right, Mark, any last words to our viewers for 2018 and any wishes for 2019?
Yeah, I wish you all peace and relaxation. I will be spending all day tomorrow slaving in the kitchen because cooking is what I do in this house. And I've got a big goose to cook and lots of salads and then other things to prepare. So I hope you many delicious victuals and alcoholic beverages tomorrow. I think I've pretty much perfected my eggnog recipe. So cheers to you all out there with goose and eggnog too.
Alexander Mercouris, any last words for our viewers? Any wishes for 2019?
Again, thanks for all your support in 2018, which made it a remarkable year for us at the Duran. Please keep supporting us, and at the same time, a happy new year to you all. May everything that you desire in 2019 come true.
Thanks for joining in the debate and conversation with us. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Absolutely.
Always be careful what you wish for. Remember.
All right, guys. On that note, we wish you all a very, very happy new year. Be safe, be healthy. Be happy and continue to follow our channel. We will always be doing our best to try to get you guys, I guess, the most honest and the most in-depth analysis of the news that we could humanly deliver on YouTube and on other channels. And we wish you all a very, very good night, a very good Sunday, and we will see you in 2019. Take care, everybody.